That I already live in a land called paradise. I wanna live in a land called paradise. I wanna go to the valley of the King. I wanna live in a land called paradise. Wanna see the birds fly and I wanna hear the angels. I wanna live in a land called paradise. I wanna go to the valley of the King. I wanna live in a land called paradise. Wanna see the birds fly and I wanna hear the angels sing. Wanna hear the angels sing. Oh, oh.
Hello, I'm Sumayan Khalifa, your host for today's program of Meet Your Muslim Neighbor. The program aims to bring in Atlanta American Muslims to be able to answer questions that most of our audience members have. We will also have an opportunity to hear from you, our audiences, by asking you to send us questions that we might not cover, and we will be happy to answer those. And I will give you the information later on in the program. Today's topic is a very important one, and it's one that lots of people have questions about. When I go out and speak, that's one of the questions that people keep on asking about, and that is about Muslim women. And today, to address that, we have Ms. Zainab Ansari, who is a friend, a longtime friend, her and her family. And Zainab, welcome. Glad you're here.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Just to tell you a little bit about Zainab, Zainab is a graduate student where she's pursuing her master's in history at Georgia State University, and we're so proud of her. Zainab is a mother of 3 amazing kids, and she was born in New Orleans, Louisiana, right, and moved to the metro Atlanta area when she was 1 year old.
Just a baby.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So basically you're an Atlantan, right?
I'm a native Atlantan, totally.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. Absolutely. Yes. Zainab has studied Farsi, has studied Arabic, and has studied Islamic studies on top of her regular studies. And she is an often thought after speaker in national conferences and with audiences throughout the metro Atlanta area through the Islamic Speakers Bureau, of which she is a prominent speaker. So, Zainab, I'm just so happy that you're here.
Thrilled to be here.
I'm going to ask you some questions that we get asked all the time.
Right.
And so I would love to get your perspective on those questions. You know, just looking at you and looking at your resume and looking at all your accomplishments, which is just absolutely amazing, our fellow Americans might think that you are just a not your average everyday Muslim woman. They think that for the most part, Muslim women are oppressed, and you are very unique versus the norm. So can you tell us a little bit about maybe roles and responsibilities between the genders in Islam, and is there such thing as gender equality in Islam?
Now that's an excellent question, and I think that the idea that Muslim women face oppression, it's an idea that's very prevalent, and the concern is definitely a valid one, especially in terms of what people might view, say, through the lenses of entertainment or through the media and so on, as well as some practices emanating from certain parts of the Muslim world. But it's really important to kind of contextualize discussion as much as possible and realize that Muslim women, like women from other faith backgrounds, other faith traditions, you know, are very diverse and experience sort of like a range of life circumstances. And a lot of times these circumstances are dictated by, you know, where they happen to live, their socioeconomic background, their level of education, family support or lack thereof. A lot of different kind of factors sort of are at play in what a woman experiences. Now, in terms of gender equality, Muslim women firmly believe that the teachings of Islam definitely provide a platform for gender equity. This idea that in Islam, men and women have sort of complementary responsibilities and roles. So just to give you an example, the Quran, which is the sacred book of revelation in Islam, in the Muslim faith, talks about human beings as sort of emanating from a single source. One of the verses in the Quran, actually in the chapter for women, the chapter An-Nisa, says, "O mankind, be conscious of God, and be conscious of God who created you from a single soul or a womb, and from that soul created its mate, and from them sprang forth countless men and women." So this idea of men and women emanating from a single source is in the Quran, which is the primary source of Islam, if you will. And then on top of that, the Quran, in many different occasions, the Quran talks about this idea of men and women sort of being part of each other, as being helping friends and protectors. And then when we sort of move away from the Quran, when one looks at the tradition of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, then one gets a sense of how the roles of men and women in that early community became diversified, and how, men might on some level have had a more public role, but women also had a public presence. Islam's teachings are very much about spiritual parity between men and women, and I think that's what I would point to. So even though men and women might not necessarily occupy the same positions or the same roles or have the exact same sort of responsibilities, on a spiritual level, they're absolutely the same in terms of what they owe to God: devotion, worship, fasting, prayer, all of these things. Men and women are completely responsible to make sure that they carry those things out, in their life. Now, in terms of social responsibilities, that's a little bit different. Muslims, by and large, do kind of embrace very kind of traditional family configurations where the man is the breadwinner and the woman stays home to take care of the children. But then again, Muslims are very diverse, and in many circumstances, women take on the role of breadwinner as well. And one only has to look at the Prophet's first wife, Khadija, and to see how she had this role of kind of economically supporting the Prophet. It was really interesting. So to go back to this question of, are Muslim women oppressed, I think the response would be that Muslim women are very diverse. They've got a range of incredibly broad life experiences. These experiences are a reflection of their particular circumstances, but the teachings of Islam definitely promote spiritual parity between men and women.
Nate, thank you. Now, the other, I'm sorry I'm asking you so many questions
No,
about
it's
diversity.
fine. These are really important questions.
Another question that comes to mind about diversity.
Yes.
Lots of people that I run into, they have a perception that a Muslim looks like that, walks like that, talks like that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
in a sense of diversity, people believe that all Muslims are, adhere to the teachings of the religion, do everything, they're ultra religious. And so talk to us about the diversity of following or not following,
Right.
Just like any other faith communities.
Right. And
what does that look like?
It looks all different kinds of ways. So you might see, in the same family, for example, and this is an experience that I've had, especially living overseas, you might see where women are fully veiled, other women do not cover their hair, and this is all in the same family. I mean, you might see, I know of families where there are varying levels of religious adherence, where someone is very particular about fasting during the month of Ramadan, and which is the 9th month in the Islamic lunar calendar, and other family members are maybe not so particular about that practice. So now, and what I'm really trying to get at here is that being Muslim, like any other aspect of the human experience, you have a whole spectrum of practice. So it's really important to get away from seeing Muslims as being monolithic. Muslims, like people from any other background, whether they are Jewish, Christian, Hindu, Buddhist, whatever tradition you can think of, there is a wide range of practice. There are different philosophies at work. There are different ways to approach one's faith and the way one sort of the way one lives one's life in the 21st century. And Muslims kind of represent that diversity, across the board. I mean, if you, for example, even if you travel to a place in the Muslim world that's kind of like the poster child for fundamentalism, Iran, for example, where I lived some years back. I mean, one of the things that we noted was that at home, a lot of people lived a lifestyle that one would sort of describe as incredibly kind of liberal and secular, and this is in the Islamic Republic of Iran. So again, you've got people who identify themselves as Muslims, but take, widely divergent approaches to their faith.
Wonderful, thank you. Now, going back to the two things that we touched upon, which is the perception that Muslim women are oppressed, and something that you brought out, that's leadership.
Yes.
The most folks, when they talk about leadership and Muslim together, they have this picture in their mind of this, a man, maybe, older, big beard, short little dress, and probably has a frown on their face, and is very mean looking.
Yeah.
And so, talk to us about leadership roles of Muslim women, and please, tell us, do they exist, and how do you define leadership? And give us some examples, some stories of people that you, if they exist, of people from a historical perspective, and also some current examples that you might think of.
That's an awesome question. This image of the stock standard kind of Muslim cleric. I think a lot of Muslims themselves are realizing that that's not the only image of a Muslim scholar or religious figure. So it's important to back up and to sort of clarify that in terms of Islam's kind of like religious structure. There's really no kind of ordained clergy, but there are people, a class of scholars, of people called ulama, which is just simply those people who have kind of mastered the traditional Islamic disciplines of Quranic commentary and memorization, and Islamic law, jurisprudence, the hadith traditions of the Prophet, peace be upon him. So when someone kind of embarks on that very traditional path of Islamic studies, it's viewed as being an undertaking that is really kind of devotional. It's the idea that one is furthering one's own knowledge and one is going to teach. And none of that is really gender exclusive. Women can do that, and they have done that. So from the very earliest days of the Muslim community, 1400 some years ago, during Prophet Muhammad's time, peace be upon him, certainly women memorized the Quran, women taught. The first scholar is widely recognized as being Aisha, a wife of the Prophet. And then, so from the earliest days you had, Aisha is interesting because she kind of embodies scholarship and political leadership. We know she played a really kind of important role after the Prophet's death. When there was a certain amount of political discord in the Muslim community, she stepped in to sort of attempt a reconciliation, and she had her following. And then from her time, there have been countless female leaders, some of them named, some of them unnamed. Sadly, a lot of times women's names don't make the history books, but there have been women rulers. For example, India had a succession of female rulers. There have been women religious authorities who actually taught male religious authorities. And there have been women who have led women's movements. If we want to fast forward to the 21st century, Syria, where I studied, is a great example of the emergence of a women's movement that is essentially a Sufi order, a Sufi fellowship of women, where there's a woman sheikha and women disciples. So female leadership at all levels has existed in the Muslim tradition and continues to exist today, with several Muslim nation states having had female premiers or prime ministers.
Great, wonderful. So going back to that image of oppression, one of the elements that gets people thinking about that, having that thought or that perception, is what they say is the marriage, the institution of marriage.
Okay.
And how the perception that some people have is that all Muslims get married through arranged marriages.
Right.
So talk to us about arranged marriages and what is that like, or if it exists in Islam, and your view on that.
That's such an interesting topic, because even I think amongst Muslims the discussion is sort of fraught, because there are, as we said, culture and religion have this really complex and intricate relationship. We're often, for a lot of Muslim communities, it's sometimes hard to distinguish between the two. So, arranged marriage, there is some basis for it in the Islamic tradition, but not forced marriage, not coerced marriage, a marriage simply in which the parties kind of, or the parents of the bride and groom sort of get together and kind of scope out, okay, who would be an appropriate partner for my child? So by arranged marriage, I think Muslims would say that there's nothing wrong with that as long as all parties are fully aware of what's going on, they're involved in the process, and they give their consent. There's a famous tradition of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, where a young woman came to him complaining of having been compelled to marry someone that she really wasn't given a choice, you know, in this marriage, and the Prophet gave her the option to sort of seek an annulment, and she said actually the person turned out to be a good person, but she wanted women to know that they had freedom of choice in that. Now, some Muslim societies, and again, the Muslim societies are really diverse. There's no single Muslim society, but in some cultures where Muslims predominate, there are, you know, arranged marriages where there's really not a lot of say on the part of the bride and groom in the process, but that's a cultural tradition which really predates Islam. I would point, for example, to India, where you have a majority Hindu society and a Muslim minority, where that practice kind of cuts across lines of religion because it's a cultural practice, which is quite prevalent in certain parts of South Asia. You know, marriage, when it translates into the American context, I mean, Muslims approach marriage in all sorts of different ways in the United States. So you have the very kind of traditional arranged marriage where sometimes the bride and groom really don't meet each other until the day they get married, although they are aware of each other. And then you have, you know, love matches where people meet independently of family members and decide to get married. You have all different ways of sort of approaching courtship and marriage. I mean, in my own case, I met my husband, you know, at school, and talked to my dad about it, and eventually the family started talking, but it was a process that he and I initiated. So every experience is different. Thank you.
Sweet. Now, going back to that perception of oppression, and one of the reasons that people might have that is when we see pictures of women who are fully dressed from head to toe, all in black, and to American culture, looking through our lenses, that, you know, spells oppression with a capital O. So do all Muslim women have to dress that way? So if you could briefly talk to us about that.
You know, absolutely. It's so interesting. So these women in black, and you know, one of the things that I really,
like that, women in black.
Yeah, but you know, it's so important though to understand those women are really, they've got voices, and a lot of those women that we see in these images, and they're veiled and they're wearing black and their faces are veiled. You know, in the context of Saudi Arabia, I'm finding these women are really sort of, they're very interesting. They go to school. I mean, the vast majority of women in Saudi Arabia are educated. They might have trouble finding employment opportunities because of gender segregation, but these women are educated. They are increasingly seeking public roles in their society. A lot of them do embrace the way they dress. They say that there is an Islamic basis for it, and surely there is. I mean, again, you know, what is required in Islam in terms of the way Muslims present themselves in public is to be modest. Men are required to dress modestly. Women are as well. Women's modesty takes on a more extensive form in the sense that women cover those who choose to cover themselves, cover their bodies, except for faces, hands, and feet. But many women will veil the face, and they'll point to the wives of the Prophet who embrace that practice. So there is an Islamic basis for it. My personal position is that it should be supported as long as the woman consents to it. It's important, I think, for consent to be there. And having talked to women who come from that part of the world where full body veiling is prevalent, a lot of them say they embrace this as part of their heritage. And a lot of others say that they want some choice in that. I think another way to approach this topic is to really kind of look at Muslim societies holistically and understand how do men and women interact in the public sphere. You know, traditionally, men also in many Muslim societies dressed in a way that was very similar to the way women dressed, except that they might not have had, you know, headgear, for example. So if we go back to these societies in the Arab and Persian Gulf, we see that men wear very long, kind of flowing garments. They cover their legs, they cover their arms. Men even wear, you know, a headdress of some sort. And that's just expected, that this is public propriety. This is simply how you dress when you're in public. You know, so it's really important, I think, not to kind of conflate the way women dress with oppression. Sometimes these things are one and the same, but sometimes they're really vastly different. For example, as in France, where women wish to veil and are barred from doing so and even arrested. So it's sort of two sides of the same coin.
Wonderful. Well, Zainab, we have a question from one of our audience members through a video question.
Oh, nice.
So let's listen to the question and answer it for them.
Okay, very good.
How do Muslim women keep their scarves from falling over?
Oh, I get asked that question all the time. Excellent question. And so, how do we put the scarf on and how does it not fall off? In my situation, I do my best, and if something happens, it's a scarf malfunction. And I had that once happen when I was speaking in public.
Oh, wow. That's the ultimate wardrobe malfunction, right? Yeah.
So we talked about how the scarf has a generational impact.
Yes.
And the scarf, the way I'm wearing it, is a square scarf that looks like this, and I'll show you how to wear that. But before I do this, let me share with you the scarf that Zainab is going to show us how to put on. And
Nice.
talk about the scarf and show us how to put it on, Zainab.
Right. Well, a lot of times this type of this style called the shayla or the shawl or the long scarf style is favored by younger women, but honestly, I've seen all ages embrace it. It's a very feminine, garment, and I would emphasize that, back to the viewer's question, the idea behind women covering is really to kind of like emphasize femininity, but not necessarily flaunt sexuality. That really is the idea behind it. So, and women will wrap these things in very elaborate ways. I mean, the way I'm going to wrap it is that I just simply would probably wear an underscarf to anchor it, so that would help it from slipping. Probably a cotton or silk underscarf. Silk is actually better for the hair in some cases. So the scarf goes on. One side is longer than the other. It's really important to make sure that that you get the proper kind of flow. And then the scarf is just simply tucked in around the ears, and one section is kind of like pulled out from under the chin, wrapped around the head, and secured with I prefer straight pins, and just like women use hat pins, there are all kinds of scarf pins on the market. So safety pins will work as well, but there are all kinds of decorative straight pins out there. Hope I didn't get my microphone. But yeah, so this is exactly how this type of scarf would be wrapped. And again, styles can become very, very elaborate. Again, a function of I think the aesthetic of the Muslim woman. They're an incredibly artistic group of women. They embrace all kinds of colors and fabrics and styles.
Wow,
Yes.
that's great. I'm going to have to go home and try that and see if I can make it work for me. So let me show you how to do the square scarf. I like silk square scarves, and basically take the square scarf and make them into a triangle. And by the way, Muslim women who do choose to cover don't have to cover all the time. They only cover when they are in public. So with their families and female friends, they don't have to cover. So, so take that, and if I had a safety pin, I would put it here, and then I would take both ends like this, and I don't want to mess up my mic, and make a knot at the end. So it's a square that became a triangle and knotted at the end on both ends. And then remember, I have a safety pin here, and here you go.
I like that. That's very neat.
So
and
it's
nifty.
pretty
I
easy.
like that.
Yeah, very easy. So that's how to do a square scarf. So hopefully that answered the viewer's question. And maybe you have, as an audience member, questions about Muslims that you would like to have answered in Meet Your Muslim Neighbor program. And if you do have a question, please send us a video question to programming@aibtv.com, and we will take your question and answer it in our future programs. Zainab, I want to thank you so much for being with us today.
You are so welcome. This has been wonderful, an honor to sit here and talk to you.
Before we go, I would like for you to meet another Muslim neighbor, Dr. Rana Haji.
I have been in the U.S. since 1988, so this is our 24th year in Atlanta. I have been in Atlanta, living in Atlanta this whole time, except for a couple of years where I was assigned by my job to live in Egypt for 2 years. So basically this year, I just turned 48 this year. So this year I spent half of my life in Lebanon, where I'm from originally, and half of my life in the U.S. I work for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, here in Atlanta. And currently, for the last few years, I've been working mainly on, in the area of global health, on children vaccine, and my job focus on ensuring that vaccines get to developing countries. But in addition to that, also I work on multiple vaccines that are important for the US. So for example, if you have heard recently about the pertussis outbreak, the whooping cough outbreak that's taking place all over the country, this work happens in my group at CDC, and we have been responsible for investigating the outbreaks, for developing guidelines for prevention, for monitoring and evaluating the effect of the vaccines in the US, here in our home country, as well as working on vaccines in developing countries. One thing also, my husband and I love collecting Islamic art, and this can include rugs, it can include old copper instruments that used to be used in households. It could be furniture items, old books. Specifically, we love collecting old books. I was in Sudan one time for a work trip and found this really old Quran that was handwritten. I am married. My husband is a doctor. He works at Piedmont Hospital. He's an endocrinologist, diabetologist mainly. And I have two kids. Noor, my oldest, my daughter, she's 21 and she goes to Emory University. She's a junior, so she graduates next year. She just finished an internship actually with the Carter Center because she's majoring in international relations and Middle Eastern studies. And she was very thrilled because she went with them to Libya to monitor the recent elections. A couple of weeks ago, she just came back actually. I have also my son, Sammy, who's 19, and he's also at Emory. He's a rising sophomore, and he's majoring in business. I realized that a lot of our neighbors and people in the community didn't know much about Islam, and they usually have a certain image about Islam. They expect you to look a certain way or behave a certain way, especially as a woman. And I think it's been fun, like seeing, people's eyes starting to sparkle a little bit when they see that there is so much, more to Muslims and to Muslim women and to the whole culture and religion.
Thank you, Dr. Rana Haji, for joining us today, and thank you to all our audience who are watching. Hope that you can join us for future programs of Meet Your Muslim Neighbor. This is Sumaya Khalifa bidding you peace.
In a land called paradise, I wanna go to the valley of the King. I wanna live in a land called paradise. Wanna see the birds fly, and I wanna hear the angels. I wanna live in a land called paradise. I wanna go to the valley of the King. I wanna live in a land called paradise. Wanna see the birds fly, and I wanna hear the angels sing. Wanna hear the angels sing. Oh.